Let's run through a very simple explanation of specialization and comparative advantage, the most simple Ricardian idea. We'll draw wheat on the vertical axis, computers on the horizontal axis. The US has a rate of trade-off between wheat and computers of 1:1. We have a standard unit of measurement for wheat of bushels, and computers are measured in units of computers. Japan has a trade-off rate of 1:4. And we'll assume that initially people in the US consume wheat and computers in a balanced ratio, and so do people in Japan. At this point, each country is totally self-sufficient. We call that autarky. Now, Ricardo's big idea was that both countries can become better off by rearranging world production in the direction according to each country's comparative advantage. Comparative advantage means the pattern of your opportunity cost of producing one good in terms of the other good. The US has comparative advantage in wheat, and Japan has comparative advantage in computers. We can tell this by looking at the slopes of the two PPFs. The US has the steeper slope and Japan has the flatter slope. What's the significance of saying that the US has the steeper slope of the production possibility frontier? It means that if the US wants to produce one more unit of the good, which is shown on the vertical axis, it does not have to sacrifice so many of the units of computers on the horizontal axis. If the US wants to produce one more bushel of wheat, it only has to sacrifice one computer. Compare that to Japan. If Japan wants to produce one more unit of wheat, then Japan has to sacrifice 4 computers. So in the opportunity cost sense, the US is the lower cost producer of wheat. There's no money in this model. There are no dollars, there's no yen. The only kind of trade that or choice that is available is, do we produce more wheat or do we produce more computers? If Japan wants to produce wheat, it is very costly in terms of sacrificing computers. Now, I'm not going to show this, I'm not going to draw this, but if you go in the other direction, talking about the opportunity cost of producing one more computer, it flips the other way. Japan can produce computers with a smaller sacrifice of wheat than the US can. So in the opportunity cost sense, Japan is the low-cost producer of computers. So here is where the basic benefit from trade enters the story. If the US and Japan do a deal where Japan moves in the direction of producing more computers and the US moves in the direction of producing more wheat, we will have rearranged world production in a more efficient way. And the two countries can come up with some kind of deal to share the benefit, to share the gain. What's driving the potential for gain is that the slopes of these production possibility frontiers are different. If Japan and the United States had the same slope for their production possibility frontier, there would be no benefit to trade. Since it's only the difference in slopes that matters, it means that it does not matter that Japan in this model is a smaller country than the United States. If I moved Japan's PPF outwards so that Japan was about the same size as the US, it would not change the basic logic. If I moved Japan's PPF even further to the right so that Japan actually became the bigger country, that still would not change the basic nature of the opportunity cost structure, and the trade would go in the same direction. The essence is marginal changes, changes in one direction or the other direction. It is not a question of absolute size of a country or absolute size of its production capability. What this means is that even a small country can engage in international trade as long as its production possibility frontier has different slope than its trading partner. This is a good illustration of the basic principle in economics that a lot of the time it's marginal changes that matter, small changes in one direction or another direction, not absolute size. So you could be a small country like Fiji and you can still trade profitably with a really big country, economically speaking, like the United States. This is the original simple Ricardian idea about why trade is not zero-sum, why it's possible for two countries to mutually benefit from trade. It isn't that one country must be gaining at the expense of the other. This is a really powerful idea. Now, like any economic model, there are limits to how you can apply it to the real world. And I'm thinking of situations like industries where you need big scale production, like shipbuilding or manufacturing passenger aircraft. Industries where there are big fixed costs for every country in participating. In those situations, the Ricardian argument won't work so well because there are other complicating aspects that I won't be addressing in this video. To summarize, Ricardo's big idea and his illustration that he made demonstrates that world trade does not have to be zero-sum. It is perfectly possible for even a large country like the United States and a small country like Fiji to trade and be mutually better off as long as the opportunity cost structure of producing goods are different between the two countries. I'll add one more comment, and that is that sometimes textbooks demonstrate the Ricardian idea starting off by talking about different labor costs in each country to produce goods and services. And they start off with different costs of labor hours for producing this or that thing in the different countries. Unfortunately, when the textbooks do it that way, it kind of obscures the real point of the Ricardian model. The Ricardian model isn't really built on the idea of whether or not labor costs are different. For whatever reason, which could be labor costs or some other kind of factor, the production possibility structure is different in the two countries. And that by itself, however it came about, is enough to explain mutually advantageous trade. And that's the simple Ricardian idea.